Duportail, a founder forgotten. A presentation for the Valley Forge Park Alliance. Among the foreign volunteers who came to the aid of the struggling colonies, none was more animated, with a more ardent zeal for the course of liberty, nor was possessed of an equally more thorough knowledge of the science of war, wrote Elizabeth S. Kite, leading biographer of General Louis Lebec Duportail. Duportail stood out immediately, in particular for the value of his insights and analysis. She wrote, Washington appreciated both. He complimented Duportail on his sound judgment and real knowledge of military science. Louis Lebec Duportail, born in 1743, was a member of the French nobility. He entered the military school of Mézières at age 18 in 1761 and was appointed a second lieutenant in 1762. He graduated as an engineer in 1765. Duportail was promoted to captain in 1773 and tasked with creating a new training manual for the French Royal Corps of Engineers. He used that manual later in organizing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In 1777, a secret committee that included Benjamin Franklin and colonial spymaster Silas Deane was sent to France to recruit professional soldiers. Engineers were atop the list. The French Minister of War allowed 4 volunteers under the leadership of Duportail to join the Continentals. The French loan of 4 military engineers came a full year ahead of the French alliance. Each officer was promoted a rank higher than his French commission. Duportail was commissioned a colonel in July 1777 and then promoted again to brigadier general in November. In his view, the chief engineer should be at least a brigadier general, so his opinions would be respected by the generals he advised. Moreover, the higher rank would silence the personal insults leveled by those who, quote, do not love the French, he wrote to Congress. If we pass before the line, he said, soldiers who don't love the French, even some ill-bred officers, will give us bad language. In the 18th century, military engineering focused on 3 areas: fortification, artillery, and cartography. Engineers were responsible for the construction of defenses. This included blockhouses, forts, stockades, and the placement of artillery. Compared with their American counterparts, French engineers were highly trained, well-schooled, and experienced. Initially, there was pushback from the American officers to the foreign volunteers. Matters came to a head when Philippe du Coudray, a French artillery expert, was made General of Artillery and Ordnance. That matter was settled when du Coudray and his horse drowned during a river crossing. Duportail still had concerns. He wrote to the French Minister of War in November 1777, there is 100 times more enthusiasm for the revolution in a single Paris café than the entire United Colonies. This people here, although at war with the English, hate the French more than the English. We prove it every day. They would prefer to reconcile with their former brothers than have among them crowds of men they fear more. Duportail, however, quickly earned the respect and high regard of his peers. His advice was sought out by Washington and carried greater weight with him than many other officers. His accomplishments at Valley Forge helped him earn that high standing. Duportail joined the Continental Army at White Marsh on November 24, 1777. His value was immediate. He judged a further attack on the British in Philadelphia would result in defeat. To justify such an enterprise, he noted in his first report to Washington's War Council, success must almost be certain. As for the Army's winter quarters, his choice was Wilmington, not Valley Forge, but noted, it's much better to lose soldiers in combat with the enemy than to lose them to disorders or desertions arising from misery. Misery destroys part of an army and leaves the other without vigor, without courage, and without goodwill. Once Valley Forge was chosen, some 2,000 huts for roughly 20,000 men had to be constructed. Within weeks, the encampment became the fourth largest city in British America, after Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Among Washington's first orders at Valley Forge was for Duportail and his engineers to survey the site and develop a plan of defenses. Duportail conducted the survey on horseback, accompanied by Colonel Richard Kidder Meade, Washington's aide-de-camp, as translator. Duportail's plan was both accurate and to scale, with 1 inch equal to 780 feet, a unit of measure the French used prior to the adoption of the metric system. Unfortunately, Duportail's original plan was left behind when the Army decamped from Valley Forge in 1778. An assistance copy was found more than a century later in the Cornell University Library. That was the plan used when the Valley Forge Commission was formed in 1893. The original would be found later in the attic of the Duportail house during renovations. The fortification of Valley Forge was completed by early 1778. It was an amazing achievement given the extraordinary circumstances. The Army lacked tools and supplies. The troops were untrained, inexperienced, and exhausted. The resulting fortifications proved so formidable, the British never attempted to test them. British General Howe noted, having good information in the spring that the enemy had strengthened the camp by additional works, I dropped all thoughts of an attack. Duportail introduced the use of sappers and miners, combat engineers who dig tunnels and build entrenchments and siege works. Among the first was Joseph Plum Martin. As a sapper, he was instructed in all things related to field works, such as how to dispose of earth, cut slopes, fix palisades, and make fascines. Duportail recommended that sappers be paid more than regular soldiers and non-commissioned officers be able to read and write. Officers were trained as apprentice engineers in command of the sapper companies. At winter's end, Duportail advised Washington not to attack Philadelphia. It is a principle of war, he said, to avoid cautiously what your enemy wants you to do. He predicted the British would evacuate the city, and instead advised Washington to be ready to move quickly once they did. For the remainder of 1778 and 79, Duportail focused his attention on the fortification of a reoccupied Philadelphia and the defenses of Boston. He also oversaw construction of America's Gibraltar, the Continental Army's garrison at West Point on the Hudson. Rather than a single fortress, Duportail's engineers constructed at West Point a series of interlocking defenses. Those defenses consisted of forts, redoubts, artillery batteries, and a great chain drawn across the river. In less than a year, Duportail had organized a corps of engineers and had become a trusted aide and advisor to the commanding general, and yet Washington had to continually plead to Congress for his and his fellow French officers' pay and continued service. In January 1780, Washington wrote to Congress, "They have been particularly useful in the course of this last period and have acquired general esteem and confidence. I cannot forbear adding that the better the gentleman at the head of the corps is known, the more he is found to be a man of abilities and distinguished military merit." In spring 1780, Duportail went south to assist with the fortification of Charleston. He carried with him a letter of recommendation from Washington to General Benjamin Lincoln, Continental Commander at Charleston. From the experience I've had of this gentleman, I recommend him to your particular confidence. You will find him able in the branch he professes of a clear and comprehensive judgment, of extensive military science, and of great zeal, assiduity, and bravery. Charleston had been under siege for 40 days, and only days from surrender, when Duportail arrived. He determined the American position was untenable, and requested permission to depart the city. General Lincoln refused. Duportail instead was captured and held as a prisoner after the city fell on May 17th. Duportail hated confinement in Charleston. He requested a parole or transfer to New York. Both were refused. Congress resolved that Duportail was essential for the effective promotion of operations and authorized Washington to make an exchange for him with the British. At Washington's insistence, Duportail was included in an exchange of officers and men captured at Saratoga. The exchange was approved on October 17, 1780, but Duportail remained confined in Charleston until year-end. During that confinement, he wrote the following to the French minister in America. You're enjoying a moderate climate with pleasing prospects. I'm sure you enjoy the cool shade of some country seat near Philadelphia, whereas I am here in a flat country where green, stagnant pools exhale corruption. There is no water fit to drink. The soil is nothing but sand that burns the flat of the foot and binds one when the wind blows. The 1781 campaign would be the crowning achievement of Duportail's remarkable military career. He served as the liaison between Washington and Rochambeau, the French commanding general, and was a go-between with those generals and the French Admiral de Grasse. De Grasse's fleet blockaded the Chesapeake, trapping the British at Yorktown. Duportail urged de Grasse to await the arrival of Washington and Rochambeau before undertaking a siege. When they arrived, Duportail undertook construction of trench and siege works around Yorktown. He was joined by just 2 junior officers. His other officers remained in Charleston. Washington wrote in his diary, "The work was executed with so much swiftness and dispatch that the enemy were, I believe, totally ignorant of our labor till the light of morning discovered it to them." The siege took its toll, however. Duportail fell ill from dysentery and was unable to participate in the surrender. Following Yorktown, he petitioned Washington and the French minister for promotion to Major General. His concern was for himself and his fellow officers who faced a demotion upon their return to France. On November 17, 1781, he was promoted to Major General. He then returned to France, completing 5 years of service in the Continental Army. In 1782, France awarded him the Chevalier de St. Louis, and in November he returned to America. When word of peace reached him there in January 1783, he wrote Washington, "My attachment to America, and in particular to your Excellency, will not finish with the war, but only with my life. I think myself very happy and much honored if I can be some utility to a country that in my heart is next to the country to which I owe my birth." In June 1783, Duportail was appointed a brigadier general in the French army. In October, he resigned his commission in the Continental Army and returned to France, where he furthered his career. In 1781, he was promoted to field marshal and appointed Minister of War in 1790. He was promoted again in 1792 to lieutenant general. By then, he was becoming increasingly concerned for his safety. He left the army and hid in Paris for 22 months before fleeing for America in 1794. This time he chose the life of a gentleman farmer. He purchased a 200-acre farm in what is now Bridgeport, Pennsylvania. During his years in service to America, Duportail crisscrossed the American colonies, but his fondest memories were of his time at Valley Forge. When Napoleon came to power, he ordered exiled emigres home, Duportail among them. On July 22, 1801, he boarded the American vessel Sophia in New York City, bound for France. He never made it home. On August 10th, around 4 p.m., he was taken by a fit of coughing. The next morning, he was found in his cabin dead. It's believed a gastric hemorrhage caused by earlier bouts of dysentery killed him. He was 58. Having never married, he left behind no heirs. Instead, his legacy is the Corps of Engineers he founded at Valley Forge. In September 1783, Duportail proposed the establishment of a Corps of Artillery and Engineers. The Corps would consist of 2 regiments of 5 companies: gunners, bombardiers, sappers, miners, and artificers, under a commandant director. He noted in his proposal, "The necessity of an academy to be the nursery of the Corps is too obvious to be insisted upon. It should be commanded under the Director General by a field officer assisted by a captain. It requires a master of mathematics and of natural philosophy, one of chemistry and of drawing. As for military matters, it belongs to the officers of the academy to give those kinds of instructions. The students are to spend 3 years at least at the academy." President Thomas Jefferson authorized on March 16, 1802, to organize and establish a Corps of Engineers that shall be stationed at West Point and constitute a military academy. In addition to military installations and fortifications, the Corps would become responsible for civil projects as well. Beginning in 1824, Congress authorized Army engineers to survey roads and canal routes, and to improve navigation on the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. Today, the Corps has more than 37,000, mostly civilian personnel, operating in the United States and over 130 other countries. It's the world's largest public engineering, design, and construction agency. Duportail provided its motto, Essayons, which translates from the French as, "Let us try." Similarly, the Corps' castle logo is modeled on the French fortification at Verdun. Among the few places where Duportail's legacy lived on is the house in nearby Chesterbrook, in which he quartered during the Valley Forge encampment. Built by Welsh Quaker John Harvard Jr. in 1740, it was passed on to members of his family until 1910. That's when it was purchased by Lawrence McCormick. He named it Cressbrook Farm for watercress he grew on it. He'd find Duportail's lost plans in the attic. In 1926, Henry Woolman purchased the property, which he donated to the University of Pennsylvania in 1939. It was designated the Duportail House on April 19, 1933, to commemorate the French alliance and mark the 150th anniversary of the cessation of hostilities between America and Britain. The event was organized by the Engineering Department of the U.S. Army and leading French-American organizations. Among the notables in attendance was General John "Blackjack" Pershing, who commanded U.S. forces in France in World War I. Given his outstanding service and the impact of his service on America, why isn't Duportail better remembered? Is it due to the fact his being French? Is it the fact he wasn't a battlefield commander and all the honors and glories that accompany that? Maybe we shouldn't ask why, but simply say, Essayons. Let us try to honor this great French American. The board of the Duportail House thanks the Valley Forge Alliance for providing us with this opportunity to speak to you about General Duportail and his important service to our nation. Thank you.